I'm going to be going out tonight, I think, with the police, and with the military, of course. We're going to do a job. The National Guard is great. They've done a fantastic job.
Trump's announcement comes as his public safety emergency declaration in D.C. enters week 2. The president has touted the achievement of the National Guard and the D.C. police in reducing violent crime. The White House announced today that officers have made 550 arrests in D.C. in just a week. Carjackings are down 83%, robberies are down 46%, car thefts are down 21%, and overall violent crime is down 22%. And breaking
with the National Guard, that's symbolism similar to that which we saw at Union Station when Vice President J.D. Vance, White House advisor Stephen Miller, and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, they went down there. And of course, as one might expect in a place like D.C., they were greeted by protesters. That is important to keep in mind. At least some polling suggests that many D.C. residents, it's a very blue city, many are generally concerned about the Trump administration's takeover. And so when I and my colleague Stacey Robinson, we actually went out on the streets and spoke to business owners and employees, we heard a mixed reaction. We certainly heard people who were concerned about how this could play out, but others acknowledged the scope of crime in the city. And in fact, there were some folks who somewhat grudgingly said, well, it does seem as though, for example, in Navy Yard, things are safer than they were just a few weeks ago.
Can you go a bit deeper into that as well? I want to know how crime has evolved over the years, perhaps in the eyes of long-term residents in D.C.
Yes, this is a very important topic because I think there's a lot of selective information circulated. The big story in D.C., as in so many other cities, we saw extremely high rates of crime, violent crimes like homicides, rape, assault in the 1980s and 1990s. And there was a downward trend that happened about 25 years ago. You saw very low levels of murder, for example, in the late 2000s. And then in the 2010s, and then especially after the pandemic, we saw another increase. Generally speaking, when you look at the individual crimes, it doesn't approach the absolute peaks that we saw many decades ago, but it was still an increase. There appears to be a decrease, but of course, those numbers in D.C. are now disputed, at least in part. For long-term residents, for example, the owner of a convenience store in one somewhat dangerous neighborhood, she really stressed just how scary it was back in the 1990s. But even to this day, she's quite concerned about, for example, people who are suspicious in her eyes coming into the store, possibly targeting her. You get the sense that despite D.C. perhaps being better than it was in the 1990s, things are still a little bit edgy and perhaps even worse than they were 15 years ago or so.
Nathan, just a couple more things. And after you've been talking to locals, what do they say about how they feel or the perception of safety after more law enforcement is patrolling the streets?
Well, that convenience store owner, I think she gave me one of the best responses on this, which is, at this point, everybody's guessing. We're still not sure because in a lot of areas, there hasn't yet been much of an additional presence from the National Guard or law enforcement, for example, on Georgia Avenue, which is one place I visited. On the other hand, if you look at wards 7 and 8, that's where at least half, according to the Trump administration, of these surging arrests have been concentrated. And those are very high crime areas. I think that you also have to keep in mind the context of ICE operating alongside law enforcement, arrests of illegal immigrants. And so that is also generating a somewhat divided response. You saw a protest in Columbia Heights near the metro station, residents and I would probably speculate activists coming in and voicing opposition there. But as I said, there are certainly residents, certainly business owners and employees who are just generally concerned about the scope of crime that they see every day. And you can also go on social media and see that at least some residents are reacting positively to what appears to be a less violent environment. Now murder-free D.C. is for, I believe, a week.
Okay, Nathan, just one final thing. There have been hundreds of arrests since the takeover. What does that indicate, and why now? Because crime, homelessness, other things, these are long-standing issues. So why is this happening currently?
Well, I think the answer boils down to one word, and that is Trump. The president has this power under the Home Rule Act to take control of the police, and he is flexing his power with the National Guard, getting cooperation also from governors in other states who are sending their National Guard to assist in this effort. I think you look at the capital of the United States, and we can get into the nitty-gritty of just how bad the homicide situation is relative to 2023. Big picture, though, D.C. is, by national standards, by international standards, a pretty unsafe place, especially if it's the seat of government. And I think we're seeing from the Trump administration on this issue, as in so many others, a desire to kind of upend the accepted way things are. And we are going to have to just see over the next few weeks and months if there's enough of a difference, and a difference that people perceive as positive, for this to really resonate as a massive change in the image and the atmosphere, the vibes of the nation's capital, this showpiece for the American Republic.
Well, Nathan, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to speak with you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Don.
Coming up, the European Commission